let's get started. For those of you who are new to this class, this is a class all about the history of American presidential elections. And if you weren't here last week, we sort of got acquainted with this very long-standing American institution that's written into our Constitution called the Electoral College. This is going to be an ongoing subject of this class. And we saw how the election in the year 1800 that resulted in the election of Thomas Jefferson as president, our third president, was the result of a deadlock in the vote of the Electoral College that year. There were I can't remember exactly, but it was like roughly maybe 72 votes on either side, and they had to decide this election in the House of Representatives, and it took the House of Representatives, I believe, 36 ballots, 36 votes in the House before they were finally able to break the deadlock. It was a true crisis. I think we would call it a constitutional crisis. And one of the reasons why there is a problem with this particular election, among many problems, is the fact that initially in the Constitution, it doesn't make a differentiation between voting in the Electoral College for president or vice president. It's all lumped together in the original constitutional formation. And so it simply says in the original text that the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for two persons, not one person, two persons, of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. So it's not like they were voting for a president and the president's running mate for vice president. They were voting for two candidates for president. And one had to be not a candidate not of their state. So it couldn't just be exclusively voting for a favorite son or a set of favorite sons. And consequently, it's very possible that you could end up in the final tally of electors, that you could have two people tied for the top spot. Generally speaking, it could be the president, the presidential candidate, and the person he favored as vice president. If you voted for both of those in the College of Electors, you'd have a tie, and this would happen, I'm sure, frequently. Or you could have a tie featuring one candidate for president and another candidate for president, and whenever that tie would be broken, your presidential opponent would become your vice president. It was a very, very unwieldy, not terribly well thought out system in the original draft of the Constitution. And after that election of 1800, they decided they were going to put forth an amendment to the Constitution to try to correct the problems that were involved with the 1800 election. Thus, Amendment number 12 to the Constitution. So let me read again this clause about the electors that will include this amendment number 12. So we can. This is really except for the adding the District of Columbia to the counts of the Electors College in 1961, I think. This Amendment 12 is really the last major reform to the Electoral College. So it would behoove us to really listen closely to this. So starting from Article 2, where it says, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors, each equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress, but no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. Okay, so that's in the original Constitution. So each state is allotted, the number of electors equal to the number of representatives in the House of Representatives, plus the number of senators in each state. But they can't be the congressman representing that state. It has to be other people, not people on the federal level. Okay, so that's the numbers, but it doesn't mean those are the people that will make up the Electoral College. And then we go to Amendment 12, and it reads this. And this was ratified June 15th, 1804. So this was a direct result of the 1800 election. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president. So they're separating out those two contests. One of whom, at least, shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. So written into this amendment is the notion that a candidate for president can't run with somebody from their own state. It has to be balanced with a vice presidential candidate from another state. So they shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots, the person voted for as vice president. So there are going to be two ballots, one for the president and one ballot for the vice president. And of the number of votes for each, which lists they shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the seat of government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president. If, this is a big if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. So it just can't be the greatest number of votes. It has to be a majority of the total number of electors. You have to get more than 50%, okay? And if no person has such a majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers, not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted for as president, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, the votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. Okay, so it isn't just all the members of the House of Representatives and voting for this candidate. It's each state has their caucus within the House, and whoever receives a majority in the vote of each state caucus, they get that state's vote, period. It's not like you get seven votes from New York and 6 votes from Pennsylvania. It's just 1 vote for New York, 1 vote for Pennsylvania, 1 vote for Virginia. So I think at this time of the Jefferson borough election, this was I think there were maybe 16 states in all. So you would have to win 9 of the votes from this House of Representatives if you were going to win that 1800 contest in the House. Okay, so it's a very different kind of thing once it gets in the House. But in choosing the president, the votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all states shall be necessary to a choice. So again, if you've got 16 states in the House voting, you will have to get more than 8. If you just get 8 votes, you can't be the winner. It has to be 9 votes. It would have to be 9-7 at least. And if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president whenever the right of choice shall devolve upon them, so if they just keep on voting and they keep coming up at a deadlock, if they don't come upon this choice before the 4th day of March, which used to be the inauguration day, not January 20th, but March the 4th, then the vice president shall act as president, as in the case of the death or other constitutional disability of the president. So if they can't make that choice for president in the House, then whoever wins on the ballot for vice president, he goes to the office of acting president until they finally settle this presidential ballot. The person having the greatest number of votes as vice president shall be vice president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. And if no person have a majority, then from the 2 highest numbers on the list, the Senate shall choose the vice president. So the House chooses the presidency if the electors are tied, and then if the ballot for vice president is tied, then that contest goes to the Senate. A quorum for the purpose shall consist of 2/3 of the whole number of senators, and the majority of the whole number shall be necessary to a choice. So if there were 16 states in 1800 and there were 32 senators in the Senate at that time, then you would have to get at least 17 senators to break that tie for vice president. Now, if it was 100 senators, then you'd have to get 51 senators to break the tie for vice president. And it says at the end of this amendment, but no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of the vice president of the United States. So all the qualifications that are in the Constitution for being eligible to be president, those same qualifications would have to be met by the vice presidential candidate, the running mate of the presidential candidate. Clear as mud? Well, that's the Electoral College in its nuts and bolts. That's in the Constitution.
Wow.
Okay, now my class that I teach on Wednesday at the Unitarian Universalist Church by Zoom, they got all in a dither because someone found this article that was in the New York Times recently, September 8th in the New York Times. Very timely. And it's by a writer named Jesse Wegman. No relation to the supermarket, I presume. And the title is a very provocative one. It says, "The Electoral College will destroy America." Pretty heavy stuff. So this really got a pretty lengthy email chain going among my Wednesday crew. And it really seemed to, be a very big concern for those folks in the Wednesday group. And I thought, well, let's not fiddle around. Let's meet this issue head on. And let's really devote a little time to discussing this issue. So I thought, before opening up the floor here, let's read what Mr. Wegman has to say. He's on the editorial board of the New York Times. It's a 2-page article. I think it's worth hearing what he has to say. Sorry if it prejudices you one way or the other, but this is what he has to say. Last week, Nate Silver, the polling analyst, tweeted a chart illustrating the chances that Joe Biden would become president if he wins the most votes in November. The "if" is probably unnecessary. It's hard to find anyone who disputes that Mr. Biden will win the most votes. This isn't a liberal's fantasy. In a recent panel discussion among 4 veteran Republican campaign managers, one acknowledged, "We're going to lose the popular vote." Another responded, "Oh, that's a given." The real question is will Mr. Biden win enough more votes than President Trump to overcome this year's bias in the Electoral College? Mr. Silver's analysis is bracing. If Mr. Biden wins by 5 percentage points or more, if he beats Donald Trump by more than 7 million votes, he's a virtual shoo-in. If he wins 4.5 million more votes than the president, he's still got a 3 in 4 chance to be president. Anything less, however, and Mr. Biden's odds drop like a rock. A mere 3 million vote Biden victory, a second Trump term suddenly becomes more likely than not. If Mr. Biden's margin drops to 1.5 million, about the population of Rhode Island and Wyoming combined, forget about it. The chance of a Biden presidency in that scenario is less than 1 in 10. And Mr. Wegman continues, "I don't know about you, but this makes me really angry. Yes, I am aware that the United States has never elected its president by a direct popular vote. I wrote a whole book about it. I still cannot fathom why, in a representative democracy based on the principle that all votes are equal, the person who wins the most votes can and does repeatedly lose the most consequential election in the land. It happened in 2016 to Hillary Clinton, who won nearly 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, a margin of more than 2 percentage points, but lost because of fewer than 80,000 votes in 3 states. 2 months away from Election Day, the odds of something like this happening again are disconcertingly high, and that's a bad thing. The presidency is the only office whose occupant must represent all Americans equally, no matter where they live. The person who holds that office should have to win the most votes from all Americans everywhere. The Electoral College, as it functions today, is the most glaring reminder of many that our democracy is not fair, not equal, and not representative. No other advanced democracy in the world uses anything like it, and for good reason. The election, as Mr. Trump would say, though not for the right reasons, is rigged. The main problem with the Electoral College today is not, as both its supporters and detractors believe, the disproportionate power it gives small states. Those states do get a boost from their 2 Senate-based electoral votes. But that benefit pales in comparison to the real culprit: statewide winner-take-all laws. Under these laws, which states adopted to gain political advantage in the nation's early years, even though it was never raised by the framers, states award all their electors to the candidate with the most popular votes in their state. The effect is to erase all the votes in that state who didn't vote for the top candidate. Today, 48 states use winner take all. I'm not sure, parenthetically, I believe Maine and Nebraska are the exceptions to this rule, but I may be mistaken. Anyway, today 48 states use winner take all. As a result, most are considered safe, that is, comfortably in hand for one party or the other. No amount of campaigning will change that. The only states that matter to either party are the battleground states, especially the bigger ones like Florida and Pennsylvania, where a swing of a few thousand or even a few hundred votes can shift the entire pot of electors from one candidate to the other. The corrosiveness of this system isn't only a modern concern. James Madison, known as the father of the Constitution, was very disturbed by the state winner-take-all rule, which he considered one of the central flaws of the Electoral College as it took shape in the early 19th century. As Madison wrote in an 1823 letter, states using the winner-take-all rule, quote, are a string of beads and fail to reflect the true political diversity of their citizens. He disliked the practice so much that he called for a constitutional amendment barring it. Didn't get very far, parenthetically speaking. It's not only liberals who understand the problem with winner-take-all. In 1950, a Texas representative named Ed Gossett took to the floor of Congress to vent about the unfairness of a system that gave some voters more influence in the election than others, solely because of where they live. New York at the time was the nation's largest and most important swing state. Ah, those were the days, my friend. And the voters who decided which way it swung were racial and ethnic minorities in large urban areas. And now he's quoting this Ed Gossett from Texas. Now, please understand, I have no objection to the Negro in Harlem voting and to his vote being counted, but I do resent the fact that both parties will spend 100 times as much money to get his vote, and that his vote is worth 100 times as much in the scale of national politics as is the vote of a white man in Texas. Oh, how the tables have turned, parenthetically speaking. And Gossett continued, is it fair? Is it honest? Is it democratic? Is it to the best interest of anyone, in fact, to place such a premium on a few thousand simply because they happen to be located in 2 or 3 large industrial pivotal states? And I end my quote from Ed Gossett. 200 years after James Madison's letter, the state winner-take-all rule is still crippling our politics and artificially dividing us. Every 4 years, tens of millions of Americans' votes magically disappear before the real election for president happens, about 6 weeks after Election Day, when 538 electors convene in state capitals across the country to cast their votes for president. Blue states give all their electors to the Democrat, no matter how many Republicans voted for their candidate. Vice versa in the red states. Given that abolishing the Electoral College is not on the table at the moment, for a number of reasons, the best solution would be to do what Madison tried to do more than 2 centuries ago: get rid of statewide winner-take-all laws. That can be achieved through and now let me just say this very slowly, this can be achieved through the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I'll repeat that again. National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. An agreement among states to award their electors to the candidate who wins the most votes in the whole country, not just within their borders. When states representing a majority of electoral votes join, the compact takes effect, making all Americans' votes relevant and all of them equal to one another. The popular vote winner then automatically becomes president. And Wegman continues, if you think this is a plot by bitter Democrats who just want to win, consider this. Texas is going to turn blue. Maybe not this year, maybe not even in 2024, but it's headed in that direction. And when it gets there, Republicans will be in for an unpleasant surprise. In 2016, Donald Trump won about 4.5 million votes in Texas. The moment the Democratic nominee wins more, all those Republican voters suddenly disappear. along with any realistic shot at winning the White House. As Ed Gossett asked, how is that fair? Every time a new national poll on the presidential election is released, it's followed by a chorus of responses along the lines of, who cares? The national popular vote is meaningless. Well, I care. So do tens of millions of other Americans. And so does Donald Trump. He tweeted on election night 2012, the Electoral College is a disaster for a democracy. Why? Because he believed Mitt Romney would win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College. Not only has he never taken that tweet down, but he continues to claim that he won the popular vote in 2016. Why does he care so much about making that case unless he believed in his heart, like the rest of us do, that the person who gets the most votes should win? And that's the end of the opinion piece. Well, that's a pretty provocative little editorial. Now, Wegman makes a reference to this movement or organization called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I had never heard of this organization before. So I looked them up, and sure enough, they have their own website, www.nationalpopularvote.com. Okay, nationalpopularvote.com. And their little general explanation of their activity is on a little one-page explanation. And this is how their program reads. And there's a lot of material on the website. Yeah, you really can get lost in all the little videos they have and other sidebars about their movement. But this is what they have to say on this summary. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact will guarantee the presidency to the candidate who receives the most popular votes across all 50 states and the District of Columbia. The compact ensures that every vote in every state will matter in every presidential election. The compact is a state-based approach that preserves the Electoral College, state control of elections, and the power of the states to control how the president is elected. The National Popular Vote Bill has been enacted by 16 jurisdictions possessing 196 electoral votes, including 4 small states, which I think includes Delaware, Hawaii, Rhode Island, and Vermont, 8 medium-sized states, Colorado, Connecticut, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, and Washington, and 3 big states, California, Illinois, and New York, and the District of Columbia. So they've gathered those 196 electoral votes favoring their movement. The bill will take effect when enacted by states with 74 more electoral votes. The bill has passed at least one chamber in 9 additional states with 88 more electoral votes. I won't name those states, though. A total of 3,408 state legislators from all 50 states have endorsed it. And it goes on from there. I don't want to take any more time. But so this is definitely a movement. I have no idea how much more momentum it has, but this is definitely something that's going on, and I was not aware about it. But let's leave that organization to one side for the moment. We've all been voting for many decades. We've all been living with, the popular vote and the Electoral College vote. We all know that these exist side by side. And, I think we all have strong feelings about this state of things. I thought it would be worthwhile taking a little little poll, a little bit of a straw vote, a little caucus, in which we all talk about how we feel about this venerable institution that's in our Constitution. So in my little email that I sent to you, I said there are three basic choices. You could vote to either retain the Electoral College as it now stands, and you could also make the choice to retain the Electoral College, but with certain judicious reforms, certain changes that might make it a little more equitable in the way the various states and votes are treated. You could vote to abolish the Electoral College outright, okay? And if you're just on the fence, if you feel like you haven't thought about it enough, you could just say pass. You could just say, I need more time to consider the issue. So really four choices, basically. And anyway, there's another person who lives in my household. I won't say who. Little anonymity here. The choice was to abolish the college, and the reason that just basically it does not represent well the popular vote, and that that the Electoral College has served its time, but that time has passed, basically. So that's my anonymous colleague at home giving opinion on this. Now, I've been given a list of people in our class, and I don't know if all of you are here, but let me just go down the list I have, and if you want to unmic yourself and give your opinion, either of those four choices, with one main reason why you've come to this conclusion, I would be most grateful for your input. So first on my list is someone who I didn't have in attendance last week, but we welcome her, Barbara Markel, who exists in that lovely Emerald City green setting in her home. I love it. I love it. Barbara, would you be willing to unmute yourself and offer your thoughts on this matter?
I agree with your mother. I think that is the most democratic way to choose the election. The fair.
Okay. Okay. So you're in favor of the direct democracy principle
yes.
here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. Okay. Sounds great. Thank you. And again, welcome. Now, I think another person who wasn't here last week, and we welcome her, is Naomi Mintzer. And Naomi, great to have you on board for the class. Do you have any opinion about the Electoral College, what we ought to do with it?
She might not be here.
To unmute.
Okay. Neil? We can always come back to you, Naomi. Just hang tight, and we'll just we'll come back. Now let's see. Do we have Mary Sheeter in the house today? No. Oh, I see Mary Sheeter's name, but you're muted. Can you unmute yourself, Mary?
Well,
Oh dear. I guess we'll come back to Mary. How about Michael? Is it Vertenom? Michael Vertenom? No? Okay. I think we had Michael last week. Okay. How about Gail? Gail Nosenchuk? No? Okay. Do we have Eileen Cassidy? No? Okay. Okay, we're not doing too well there. How about Francine? Francine Kurtz? Oh, there's Fran. Okay. How are you?
you have to unmute.
Yeah, we still can't hear you yet. We can't hear you. Why doesn't everybody unmute themselves now? Let's take the guesswork out of it. If you can unmute yourself, that would be great. Really, yeah, you're still
You know-
muted, Fran.
There she
How
is.
about now?
Okay, we can hear you now, yes.
Okay, I agree with what has been said previously.
Okay, you're for abolition?
I just saw
Um, Okay, very good. And any particular support or more detailed reason for that?
Yes, it's the only really fair way.
Okay, okay. All righty, thank you. Now, let's see, do we have Robert Click here today? I guess not. No, I don't think I see Robert here today. Okay. And what about Susan McClary? Okay, hi. How
Hello.
are you?
Before the session started, I had thought my decision was going to be to keep it with some changes.
Uh-huh.
And then after hearing the op-ed piece, I think I would switch to saying to abolish it, because basically my thoughts were that the changes would end up saying, one person, one vote kind of thing, which if you abolish it, it then does become that the popular vote is the rule.
Okay. Okay, so again, for abolition. Okay, how about Richard? Richard Mallison, I see you. How are you today? Good to see you.
Very good, thanks, Mike. I would say probably to make some modifications in it. I
Okay,
like
retain
what,
with reforms, okay?
Yeah, I like Madison. I do not understand the movement that says there's a bill, because I'm under the impression that it can only be changed by a new amendment, where the
Okay.
3/4 of the states would have to ratify a new
Okay,
amendment.
so you would say that the amendment process is the route that would need to be taken.
Right, and I
to
don't know,
change.
with the states that have a small population and some of the smaller states, I don't know if they would go along with that, because they would be relinquishing more influence in the election.
Yeah,
But,
so
I don't know, I'd have to do some more research on that movement you talked about. I don't know how they can pass a bill.
yeah,
to-
I'm unclear, but it's a pretty substantial website, and yeah, I would encourage you to check it out at your convenience. It's
Yeah,
just a
I
movement
will.
I was not aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Richard. Thank you. Do we have Susan Will? Oh, I think I see Susan. Yes. How are you today? Boy, you look like you're in a tropical clime. That's cool.
Yeah.
My mind.
I wish you all were here. Yeah.
Wow.
I did a little bit of research just before class also, and the only thing that I found that was a good argument in favor of the Electoral College is that it has a way of guaranteeing the certainty of the outcome of the presidential election. And because you don't have to worry about how you're going to get all those 300 million votes counted. And we're this year in particular that could be a
Oh,
Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah.
close
drag on
election.
a long time.
Interesting.
I hadn't heard about this National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I think that sounds very interesting because that has the potential, it seems to me, to mitigate some of the issues about counting the votes.
Okay.
Or maybe it could be worked in a way that would help on that. You'd have to figure out what the limits of certainty about the count you're willing to tolerate, and because I think that could turn out to be an issue if you want to convert to a solely popular vote basis.
Okay. So so where do you land right now or are you still undecided?
I think it makes sense to make a change. I'm
Okay,
not sure exactly what's the best change to make,
okay,
but I don't think that the current system makes any sense anymore. I mean, and as you said, it probably wasn't that well thought out to begin with. I think there are a lot of things that the founders didn't anticipate or couldn't agree on or just couldn't make right. And that's
okay.
our role as the inheritors of this, is to try to move it toward a more perfect system.
Okay. With your permission, I'm going to put you in the retain with reforms. Is that agreeable for the moment?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just put you there because
Argument.
it sounds like that's kind of where you're leaning. Let's
Yeah.
see, is Rosalind Ott in the room today? Oh, I see Rosalind Ott. I think you're muted. If you can unmute yourself, that would be kind of great. No? Oh dear. Okay, well, that's fine. That's fine. Maybe we can hear from you later. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Okay, let's see. Do we have Frank? Is Frank here? No, Frank? Okay. Oh, yeah, I see Frank, but you're muted. So if you can unmute yourself, Frank, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. Okay, well, maybe not. Okay, we'll skip you for the moment. Let's see, we didn't have Robert Click, so I don't think Gina Click is here. Is Gina here? No. Okay. How about, is Greg here? Greg Wiltrout?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Oh, good to hear from you. How are you?
Happy to be here. Thanks.
All righty. What do you think about this business?
I would retain the Electoral College with some modifications.
All righty. Any thoughts on what would be a good thing to make it a better system?
I think it's critically important that the smaller states get as much recognition as any of the large states. Whatever trends that we decide in this country that we're going to go, we need to do it uniformly. It's never
Okay.
perfect and support everybody, but we need to identify the fact that any progress that we make in this country is going to affect a state like Iowa as much as it's going to affect a state like Florida.
Okay.
And I would also dovetail it, and this is an entirely different topic, but in that reform, I would also add campaign election reform laws. I think elections in this country are deplorable.
Okay. Well, that's another issue, but that's certainly an important issue also. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Is Alice here? Alice Jambra? Okay. Don't think I see Alice. Okay. Let's see. What about Marie Bonaventura?
I think it should be retained with modification, but
Okay.
there has to be more weight to the population.
Okay. So
There has to be a bigger factor in it.
okay. Wait. Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Is Lenore here? Lenore Belzer?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello. How are you?
I'd like to say abolish it, but that would take a constitutional amendment, and the small states would never ratify such an amendment. So I guess I would say we should keep it, modify it, virtually outlaw the winner take all concept.
Okay, so outlaw winner take all. So yeah, I think that probably would also require, maybe that also would require in the amendment process as well. I think I think that would probably need to be pretty well spelled out. Probably. Let's see, Gerald Keppel.
Gerard,
Okay. Hi. How are you?
good, good. I'm leaning towards the retain or modification. And modification being against the winner take all.
Okay. So that would be retain with reform. So something that would take away the winner take all feature.
Part of the problem is, as far as the population, the Reform Act of '29, which changed the percentage of population to represent the representatives. So you're not having a true thing that the founding fathers were basing it on.
Yeah, this was definitely something that really wasn't in the, I think, original conception of the college. Yeah.
328 million people they didn't contemplate.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the demographics of the country has changed so much. I mean, there are so many more people being represented by one representative in the House. You know, so that's just the scale is so immense. It definitely makes a very different proposition. And Suzanne, what do you think?
I don't think I understand it completely, but I feel it should be abolished. They say your vote counts, but does it really count?
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Thank you. Let's see, Don. Don Wagner. How are you?
With a caveat to be careful what you wish for, I would be in favor of looking at with eliminating the winner-take-all concept.
Absolutely.
Okay, so retain but eliminate winner-take-all.
What does it take to have an amendment passed? 2/3 of the states?
3/4.
3/4.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy lift. You know, it's not something to be taken lightly at all. Yeah, Linda, what's your take on this situation?
I'm definitely with the retain with reforms. I don't like the winner take all. And if you put it to the popular vote only, you've got states, the huge states, controlling the entire election. And you're just enfranchising so many people with this winner take all thing. So that's where I stand.
So it's always a problem with the with direct popular vote. The large states have the advantage. So yeah, that's a real problem. Let's see. Do we have Jean Nicholson here? Okay. Alrighty. I don't know if we have Jean. How about Ina Shear? I don't think I see Ina Shear. Okay. Alrighty. And there's Herb Shear as well. I don't think he's here either. Okay. Ruth Downey?
Yes, Michael, I'm here.
Howdy,
Can you hear
how are
me?
you?
Great.
Good to see you.
Okay, I believe that we should abolish the Electoral College
Okay.
because the representative democracy part of it hasn't worked. At least twice in our lifetime, we've seen the person with the popular vote not get to be elected president. So if you could start with a clean slate, that might be a good idea. But you know what? We're living in a dystopian society, so that ain't gonna happen. I hate to be so negative, but I'm afraid.
So you would favor starting tabula rasa fresh in
Yes.
this electoral process, and
Yes.
try to you'd say a good study group to determine a different means would be worth taking up. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Let's see, Mary Ann Hefner. I see Mary Ann Hefner. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Michael?
Very good, very
I guess
good.
good that you're here.
What's your thoughts on this?
Well, at first I thought to abolish, but I would rather see some changes made. I think as I looked back on I think there were 5 presidents that were elected without the popular vote. But I think government should be governing people, not acreage. And I agree with the points that everybody that is advocating keep it with reform. I agree with their points.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's see, Sue Tomaszewski.
I'm right here.
Oh, already?
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you. Very good.
I've thought for a very, very long time, and I may be getting a little confused now, but I'm about abolishing it and maintaining the popular vote for a couple of reasons. One being, I would really like to see in the whole electoral process, when the candidates are really giving their spiels and doing what they're doing, I'd like to see more attention being taken to the states that aren't the swing states. I'd like to see, I figure we're in New York, but we're considered to be Democratic and they're not playing with us. They really don't care what we think because they're just assuming that we're going to go Democratic. The other reason that I think, and in terms of the smaller states, I mean, being from a larger state, but being from the smaller states, I'm not so sure it's as discrepant. What I really believe is, as a larger state, I think it's still spread. I really do think, if you look at New York State and we look at our area, Erie County is significantly different than Niagara County.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you look at how that plays, I think that plays across the large states and the small states. So I think it all comes out in the wash anyway. I don't think we need the Electoral College to take our personal votes away to enable the states to have equity. I believe it's just built into the automatic process of it, if you just look across the way the states are. So okay. I just don't think it serves the purpose that it's meant to serve any longer.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Carol Tato. I think I see you. How are you today? Great to
I'm
see
good.
you.
How are you, Mike?
Great to see you without a mask.
I know. That's why I had to get up and answer the door. Well, I'm with this Mrs. Wagner. Where is she? There she is. Who said retain with reform because of that winner take all thing. I don't like that winner take all. But on the other hand, realistically, could we ever get anything done? I don't know what the best route is in this day and age, but something needs to be done. It amazes me it hasn't been done before.
Yeah, it's always fallen short, and many times people have tried, but yeah, you're right. It's definitely a mighty task to be accomplished.
It's a mighty task, and people have to be informed and educated about it, and
yes, yeah, people need to be aware of what the problem is. Carol Hensel, another Carol.
I'm torn, but I think I'm leaning more toward abolish it. I know there are problems, and either looking at a DVD that you recommended about the presidents or doing some reading, the electoral system seemed to make sense when our country was first founded, because as they said, something about the people of the country really don't know the people who are up for being elected. So it was left to the Electoral College to do it. That obviously is not the reason nowadays. Before I came to this class, I got a phone call from a friend, and I told her about the class, and she said she had just been talking to a friend of hers from India. And she said that when India set up their rule of government, I guess when they split in 1948 or so, that they followed the Constitution of the United States, but they did not include the Electoral College. And she probably didn't think to get into a conversation then. I really don't know if they're doing a lot better than we are or whatever. I don't know. And about the small states, I'm, coming down on the side where just vote, count it, and get on with life. I also think of reading about California and other states burning and climate migration, the potential of climate migration, that you might find those small states filling up after all.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you might
Yeah.
find it a non-issue. And another, if you made an amendment to tweak it now, you'll probably be doing it again on down the line anyway. So I think I'm coming down on the side to abolish it.
Huh, yeah. Yeah. Times change. And as you heard in that article, in the 1950, New York was a swing state and Texas was not being paid attention to by candidates. And, kind of the roles have switched over time. So yeah, states don't necessarily retain their electoral identity, over the decades. Let's see, do we have Christine Denny here?
Hi, Michael. Yes, I'm here.
Hello, good to see you. How are you?
All right. I'm good. I definitely feel we should abolish it. The Constitution starts off with all men are created equal. And if that is true, then all votes should be equal.
Oh, very good.
Oh, okay, so that's a great great sentence. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And let's see, Betty Levin, are you here today?
I am here today.
Great to see you. How are you?
My camera is not working today for some reason.
Oh, okay.
I'm leaning toward abolishment.
Okay.
It's very hard for me to understand why the side getting the fewer votes should win.
Yeah, that's a puzzler, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. And last but not least, Jeffrey McCauley, are you here today? Oh, we miss you, Jeffrey. You always spice up the class. Okay, well, we hope to see you another time then. All righty. Well, thank you all for your considered opinion. Did I leave anyone else? Did I leave anyone out of this discussion? Did we not hear from anybody who's here?
I might be unmuted now.
Okay, and who is talking?
Mary Sheeter.
Okay, great. Yeah, we wanted to hear from you a little earlier. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, well, yeah, what you've heard everyone else. What are your thoughts now?
Well, I'm leaning towards abolishment because I didn't quite understand the full scope of what National Popular Vote was recommending. But I did look it up and while we were talking, and it shows that New York State has elected into law, and I don't know what that means, elected into law, their proposal. It bears more looking into, but I wanted you to know that it was, New York was involved.
Yes, I think you're right about that, yes. So, all righty. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. And anyone else that we didn't hear from? All righty. Well, thank you very much, everybody. So I guess you're probably wondering, well, what does this guy who's brought you all here today think about all this now? So I tell you, it's a very, very difficult issue, and I would certainly, all things being equal, I would say abolish the darn thing. It is so very antiquated in various ways. We could spend days talking about ways where it just is not meaningful in 2020. And yet it is baked in to the Constitution. And changes to the Constitution can't be taken lightly. I think that this is a very novel approach, this national popular vote movement, but something as substantial in its change as getting rid of the Electoral College really, I think, needs to be done through the amendment process. I think it's a big step, and it's a heavy lift. You need 2/3 of both houses of Congress to get it out of Congress, and then you need 3/4, I think, of all the states' legislatures or state conventions to approve the amendment. It's something that really needs a large majority statement in its favor to become constitutional law. But I think something as big, as important as this, requires that kind of majority will to get it done. So I frankly think that if this national popular vote thing gains momentum, I quite frankly think that the Supreme Court might weigh in and say that it's not constitutional. A change of this magnitude, I think, really would require the amendment process. So I'm no constitutional scholar. I don't really know if I'm correct, but I have this funny feeling that this really could become a real legal boondoggle if this national popular vote thing really does, gain momentum in some of these other states. As for my personal view about the change, for me, it would probably be retain with reforms, and basically a very selfish reason. I would like to be living in a battleground state. I'd like to be living where the action is, electorally speaking. I'd like to have politicians fighting for my vote. And they don't give a damn about my vote right now. They only care about the people in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Florida and Ohio and who knows what other states, but New York, it's as if we might not as well exist. We might as well just fall off the face of the earth, and the Electoral College really wouldn't care, or the presidential candidates wouldn't care. We're like the also-rans. We're like the people on the sidelines. We just don't matter at this point in time. And I hate feeling that I don't matter, when it comes to the national election. It's just too important an act for the electorate, for certain voters to feel like their franchise is not worth anything. And that's the way I feel. I'm taking this very personally. But I feel like I want to move to Ohio so that I could actually feel like my presidential vote counts. And there's various other things that I could say about the Electoral College. But just talking about this case, this critical case where you have a tie, and you throw this election into the into the House of Representatives, and each of the states gets one vote. So you've got 50 states, and And the people in Washington, D.C., in the District of Columbia, they're not involved in that process. They don't have a vote in the House of Representatives, or they don't have a Senate, and they don't get a vote in this House of Representatives. They're not part of it at all. So they're automatically disfranchised. So that's one thing. And once you get into the House, it's one vote per state. So California gets one vote. Wyoming, a tiny population state, gets one vote. New York gets one vote. Alaska gets one vote. Does it make sense that these vast disparities of state population get very much unequal treatment in this House of Representatives runoff? To me, that makes no sense at all. That's the difference in the weight of these different states' votes compared with each state's respective population is breathtaking in its inequity. That, to me, is a big flaw in this Electoral College system, and that certainly would be one of the things that I would very much consider to be something that would need to be reformed. That one vote for each state is, to me, an immense disaster in a supposed representative democracy. This does not represent the desires of the people at all, in my opinion. So that's definitely one aspect. As far as the winner-take-all aspect, I think that's a really big problem. And I think it certainly can be improved. Now, the two states that I mentioned, I don't know if I got them right. I think it's Maine and I think it's Nebraska. With those states, I believe, they do it so that you get one elector that represents a congressional district in that state, and that's one elector. You get one electoral vote if the popular vote for one candidate wins in that particular congressional district. So it's based on the winners in each congressional district in that state, and plus you get the winner of that state popular vote. You get those two senators added, I think, to those votes. So you get the votes that are the equivalent of the reps of the representatives, and then the winner of that state popular vote, you get those two senators. I like that plan. So that's only two states in the union that do it that way. I frankly think if the majority of states divided up their votes so that, for example, in New York State, you have Erie County, which is I'd say a pretty heavily Democratic Party-based state in terms of the registration. Normally speaking, unless it's an anomalous election, generally speaking, Erie County is generally going to go for the Democratic candidate. And in the scheme that I'm envisioning, that particular region of the state, Erie County, or one of let's say Brian Higgins' district in Erie County, that would probably get one Democratic electoral vote. But then you get the 27th district in New York, which is heavily weighted toward a Republican electorate. Normally speaking, other than an anomalous election, that congressional district would vote heavily for the Republican candidate, and thus you would get one electoral vote representing the Republican candidate in New York State. Why should we be throwing away the voting power in the presidency of either the voters in Brian Higgins' district or the voters in Chris Jacobs' district? I think that's kind of unfair, for those voters who voted in droves to create that majority in that district, in that congressional district, why they should not have their majority votes counted in the Electoral College. I think wouldn't necessarily take all the disparities in terms of the popular vote representation, but I think it would take a lot of the disparities out. So, you know, New York, I don't know if we have 29 electoral votes this year. I think we do. You know, in my way, we would get at least some votes, even though it's largely a Democratic state. We'd have some votes to go for the Republican candidate as well as the Democratic candidate. And I don't see what would be wrong with that. What would be wrong with allowing the Republican electorate in New York to have their say in the general election? I think that would be just splendid, you know, and say in Texas, which at least now is, I think, a pretty red state. You know, why shouldn't the people who vote Democratic in that state and in some of the more Democratic congressional districts get their votes counted? I think it works both ways. So that would be my ideal reform, to first to get a certain amount of ability to have you know, votes for both parties represented in a single state, depending on the way the congressional districts decide. And then, you know, if the Republican popular vote is greater in the state, then you get those 2 senatorial Republican votes as well, or vice versa on the Democratic side. But I think it would make for not necessarily the most representative choice of the population, but certainly a greater representation of the popular vote. And I think that it would, again, give all 50 states the feeling that they're all involved, that they all have skin in the game, whether you're a small state or a large state. You feel like that maybe the candidates will visit my state. Maybe you'll actually put some campaign money into advertising in my state, or you know, that kind of thing. There are some states that get totally ignored by the candidates. In that little article from the National Popular Vote website, it says in 2016, almost all campaign events, 94% of campaign events, were in 12 states where Trump's support was between 43 and 51%. 2/3 of the events were in just 6 states.
Wow.
6 states deciding a national election out of 44 plus the District of Columbia. There's something wrong with that equation.
Wrong.
So I really do think that we need reform, and I think it would be a very challenging thing to totally get rid of the college, but I think the college itself really does need some work. And I hope that some wise, politicians and statesmen and legal eagles will get on this, because I think that we're going to have a very dissatisfied electorate until we do that. So anyhow, I've spoken my piece, and we'll just leave it at that for now.
Can I ask a question, Michael?
Sure. Who's speaking?
Jerry Keppel.
Okie dokie.
Where is it that it's winner take all? Because that's not in the Constitution. Is that under the states? So
yeah. These are all state laws.
So it would be easier to change that.
Yeah. So maybe it is something that has to be done through the states. Again, I think a lot of this problem comes with this initial constitutional impetus to share the regulations about national elections with the states. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of power with the states when it comes to national elections. I mean, every state votes in a slightly different way. You know, the way the voting machines are, or if they have voting machines, it's all the decisions of these different states. And for a national election like the presidency, it's just a chaos of different procedures. And of course, the thing with mail-in votes, I mean, some states vote exclusively for mail-in votes, other states don't. Other states do it in a kind of, half and half kind of way. There's no sense of unanimity in the electoral process over the 50 states. And I frankly think, this is my opinion, I frankly think there's just too much discretion given to these individual states when it comes to the presidential election system. For local state elections, I say fine, you can do what you will in these individual states, but for the national election, the presidency, I really think there needs to be a greater uniformity. And right now, the fact that it's so decentralized adds all these wild cards into the process. I really would like to see this Electoral College, all the factors dealing with the Electoral College being dealt with on a federal national level. But these states, they won't give up that power. Once you've got the power, it really takes a lot to give it up, and they just won't do it. Sue, I think I see your hand up.
I'd be very afraid at the present moment. I'd be very afraid if we left it to the federal government to now mandate how the election was going to be run. Yeah. I'd be very nervous about that. I would not want the states to give up their power in that term. I mean, you look at how contentious this whole thing is.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it went to the Supreme Court, even if it went to Bill Barr, we'll just throw in the ticket now. You know exactly what would happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I just have to imagine that in other democratic countries like I don't know, France, Germany, what have you, that that they have an electoral system for their chief executive, prime minister, what have you. That's where it's a little more united in its purpose or method. That they just don't leave it to individual cantons or provinces. Right. I don't know. I'm sure Canada must have a much more united electoral system for their major office somehow. I don't know.
Well, I'd like to see it. I'm in agreement with you. I would like to see. I mean, I'm actually surprised how different it is across the counties. Never mind across the states. It's different county by county by county. It's like, what? I talk with people in Niagara County and go, you guys are doing what? Like, how is that working?
I mean, just the fact that they vote, I think, much, in Erie County, the polls are open from 6 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. I don't think does Niagara County start at 9 in the morning or noon? It's nuts.
The times are different. The times are different. The amount of early voting is different, what have you. So it's just, it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm in agreement. I would like to see it. I would like to see it much more nationalized, but if we ever get to a point of being anything like normal where there could be a sense of trust and we weren't doing such bipartisan messiness now.
Anyway, it's the presidential election process to me it just seems like it's very decentralized in its methodology, and it's kind of tough. So if you're interested in an entertaining documentary about the Electoral College, I recommend this one hosted by Mo Rocca, who you will see oftentimes on CBS Sunday morning. And it's called Electoral Dysfunction. Electoral Dysfunction. And it talks a lot about issues like the ones we've been talking about. Now, I have about 2:20, and we haven't even gotten to the election of 1824, and I apologize for that. But this is an election that really did show the problems of this particular system of electing a president. So let's look into this a little bit. Let's see. Let's first take a look at this article that I find in this book published by Congressional Quarterly about presidential elections. So this is what they have to say about this election. And they call this the last of the old order, 1824. The 1824 election is, in an odd way, represented everything that the framers of the Constitution had hoped to see. Without a permanent party system, a number of candidates vied for the presidency. Unable to win an electoral majority, the three top finishers saw their names submitted to the House of Representatives for a final decision. The candidate representative of elite interests and sensibilities and who had ties to the House of Representatives won the election. So 1824, this is at the tail end of an 8-year term for the President James Monroe. And the time of this presidency of Monroe is sometimes been called the era of good feeling. And I don't know that it was entirely filled with good feelings, but generally speaking, in terms of the political map, it was basically a one-party country. The Federalist Party had pretty much faded from the scene by the time of the War of 1812. And by 1824, there was basically this one party in town, the Democratic Republican Party, sort of the ancestor of the Jeffersonian, Jeffersonian wing of the federal government. And basically, ever since Jefferson won the election, it had been pretty much the case where the national government was in the charge of the Democratic Republicans. Jefferson, followed by the administration of James Madison, both two-term presidents, and then another two-term president, James Monroe. So for 6 consecutive elections, the government was being run by the Democratic Republicans. And so by the 1824, there really is no two-party system in this country. And we find there's basically just these various factions within this one party. So by the time of this 1824 election season, there's really no one person who has been designated James Monroe's heir to the presidency. And the Democratic Republicans, they hold a little bit of a caucus, because that's generally speaking how candidates were chosen at this point. They didn't have primaries, they didn't have conventions at this time. They basically held caucuses within the Congress. And in 1824, it was kind of an apathetic year. People didn't really show up to these caucuses. It was kind of a minority of Congress people who selected candidates. And in this particular caucus, the person who was most favored for the presidency was someone named William Crawford. I'd say, I'll bet money that not one of you know who William Crawford is.
No.
So this was a guy who I think held 2 different cabinet positions in Monroe's administration. I think he was at one time Secretary of War, at another time Secretary of the Treasury. Anyhow, I guess he was considered a fairly good possibility as presidential candidates go by the party, and so he was given 64 votes on their ballots for the caucus, receiving just a couple ballots, 2 precisely, was John Quincy Adams, son of the 2nd president of the United States, John Adams. And he was also a member of Monroe's cabinet. He was the Secretary of State. And I'd say, generally speaking, secretaries of state, they had a pretty good road to the presidency. Thomas Jefferson had been a Secretary of State. James Madison had been a Secretary of State. That was a good avenue to the presidency. He only got 2 votes in the caucus. Henry Clay, he was the Speaker of the House at the time. one of the great public speakers of all time, and certainly one of the most influential speakers of the House ever. He really invented the role of Speaker of the House. He only got 2 votes in the caucus, and 1 vote for a little-known politician at the time, nationally speaking, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson, he held some political offices. He was at times in Congress. He was at times, I think, a judge in his native Tennessee. He held a number of different roles, but he was most famous for being a fighter in the War of 1812, and especially being the victorious general of the Battle of New Orleans at the tail end of the War of 1812. The irony is that his victory came a good number of weeks after there had been a peace treaty signed at, I think that it was called the Treaty of Ghent, the treaty signed between the Americans and the English in the Treaty of Ghent in 1815. This was a great military victory, but it was a military battle that really didn't have to be fought, alas. But that made him a great American hero. And a lot of Democratic Republicans felt that he might be future presidential timber. Anyway, he wasn't given a lot of votes in that caucus, but still his name was being bruited about for the presidency. Another candidate was in the mix, John Calhoun, who was, I think, a representative from the South. He was the Secretary of War, and he bowed out of the race early. But in the run-up to the election, there were basically 4 candidates. One of them was this William Crawford, but alas, this favorite of the caucus had a severe stroke during the presidential campaign, and he was basically incapacitated. He, had some, paralysis, I presume, from the stroke, and I think he became blind. So he was very seriously incapacitated during this time. Meanwhile, some of these sad runner-ups from the caucus decided that they would be willing to be put forth as candidates: Henry Clay, John Quincy Adams, and Andrew Jackson. Now, Andrew Jackson, even though he may not have been the most polished speaker or the most, the most civilized, maybe, kind of representative on the national level, he had this idea that the people really loved him, that he would be the choice of the people if they had a say in the matter. Now, the election of 1824 is really the first election in which we have actual data for the popular vote. For the most part, before that, it was really pretty much just the Electoral College that we had statistics for. And I'd say the majority of states really did not really elect their electors through the popular vote. It was mainly election of electors through the state legislatures. But with this election, here we finally get the people weighing in. And so consequently, even though it was a small percentage of the popular vote, potential popular vote, using that as a gauge for the Electoral College, at least partially, Andrew Jackson won the popular vote in this election. It was probably less than 20% of the eligible voters of the time. Andrew Jackson got a count of 151,271. 151,000, basically. That's astonishing how small a number of popular votes were counted in that election. Coming in second was John Quincy Adams. Okay, he was the Secretary of State at the time. He received 113,000 votes, 122. So Andrew Jackson had about roughly 41% of the vote. John Quincy Adams had 30%, about close to 31% of the vote. This candidate that was, had this stroke, William Crawford, he still got 40,000 votes and about 11% of the vote. Meanwhile, Henry Clay came in fourth. Well, actually, he got 47,000 votes, 47,531 votes. And in the Electoral College, Andrew Jackson got 99 electoral votes. John Quincy Adams got 84 electoral votes. And even though Crawford got less popular votes than Clay, he still got more electoral votes than Clay. He got 41 electoral votes. Clay got 37 electoral votes. Now, this 12th Amendment to the Constitution, it makes the stipulation that so 99 electoral votes Andrew Jackson got the most electoral votes, but out of a total of 261 electoral votes, it was less than half of the electoral votes. So he could not be acclaimed the winner of the election. Mm-hmm. He would have to eventually amass he would have to amass at least he would have to amass 131 votes to become president. So the vote has to be thrown into the House of Representatives. Andrew Jackson, 99 votes. John Q. Adams, 84 votes. Doesn't matter, has to go into the House. So what's it going to be? Well, it wasn't going to be Crawford because he was just too sick to be president. So he really would have to be taken out of the equation. But he still got more electoral votes than Clay. Clay was out of the picture. He could not be voted on by the House of Representatives. But Clay was the Speaker of the House. He wielded a little bit of influence among the people who would be voting in the House of Representatives. So, in the Electoral College, Henry Clay, even though he did not win enough to be voted on in this runoff in the House. In the original Electoral College vote, he won the votes for his own state, Kentucky. He won 14 electoral votes from Kentucky. He won 3 electoral votes from Missouri. He won 16 electoral votes from the state of Ohio. And so, he had some influence among the congressional caucuses, the caucuses within the House of Representatives in those 3 states. And Henry Clay and Andrew Jackson, they had a mutual detestation of each other. There was no way that Henry Clay was going to allow the states that had voted for him to put their electoral votes toward Andrew Jackson. So in the final count of the House of Representatives, all 3 of those states, Kentucky, Missouri, and Ohio, all of those states were enjoined to vote for Quincy Adams, John Quincy Adams. I believe the state legislature, they tried to get the electors to vote for Jackson. The state legislature, they really wanted them to go for Jackson in Kentucky, but Henry Clay just had too much sway, too much influence over his Kentucky delegation, and he put them into the column for Quincy Adams. So the final count was 13 states for Adams, only 7 states for Jackson, and 4 states for William Crawford, who really couldn't have become president at all. So here was a case where the winner of the popular vote and the winner of the most electoral votes, but not a majority, Andrew Jackson, did not become president in 1824. An amazing thing, an amazing thing. And if anyone believes that the popular vote is important, one would have to say there's an injustice that's been done. And just coincidentally enough, in the aftermath of this victory of John Quincy Adams for the presidency, John Quincy Adams decided to make as Secretary of State Henry Clay. Many people believe that there was what is called a corrupt bargain made between Clay and Quincy Adams to make Clay the Secretary of State in Quincy Adams's administration. There's no solid evidence to prove that point, but that claim has definitely been made over the years.
Quid pro quo.
Smells funny. Smells very, very funny.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And well, Andrew Jackson, he knew that he had gotten the shaft. He knew that he had the people's vote, and that he was not going to take that lying down. Andrew Jackson was never one to walk away from a defeat. I'd say he was probably the most duel-prone president that we ever had, ever. I'd say he had more duels than Alexander Hamilton ever had. And once he had the feeling that he had an injustice done to him, or that his honor had been besmirched, he was not going to let that go unanswered. So he was determined that the next electoral cycle, when people voted for president again in 1828, he would again be making a contest for the Democratic-Republican ticket. And indeed, it turned out to be a rematch between him and John Quincy Adams. And in that election, it was no contest like the one in 1824. Jackson really did build a very strong campaign organization, I think largely with the assistance of a New York State native son, Martin Van Buren, who would eventually become a vice president in the Andrew Jackson administration. It's interesting when you compare the popular vote in 1828 with that in 1824, you see an immense difference. Andrew Jackson in 1828 got about 642,000 votes for his race in 1828, as compared with his 151,000 in 1824. So that's an immense increase in the popular vote in 1828. John Quincy Adams was no slouch either. He got 500,000 votes in 1828, as compared to the 113,000 votes he got in 1824. So the popular vote electorate increased greatly between 1824 and 1828. I think that the requirements for owning property in order to vote was definite. A lot of those requirements were abolished in this time in the 1820s. It allowed people who were not wealthy to take part in the vote. And so this really did swell the influence of the popular vote. Also, I think that there were more states that permitted the popular vote to vote for the electors, whereas there had been more states in 1824 in which the state legislatures voted for the electors. So the influence of the populace voting was much greater in 1828 and in all further elections after that. And it should be said that, oh gosh, I don't know, sorry, my thought escaped me. Darn it. Oh well, I'm just gonna have to let that fly. So the popular vote, attains a much greater value, starting in 1828. And I think because of that greater importance, I think the tendency for states to, institute laws requiring a slate of electors being voted on by the voters in a winner-take-all methodology, the motivation for that becomes much greater because, again, it's not state legislatures making the decisions so much anymore. It's the voters. And to create the power of each state to wield influence in the elections, they were going to make their popular voters, the people, vote for a large slate of electors of a particular party. And so each state would be able to say, amass a large number of electors for each candidate. So it's with this advent of greater power by the popular vote that the tendency toward winner-take-all, laws in each state for the presidency and for the Electoral College becomes a much more popular thing. By the time, I'd say, of the 1860s, I would say it's pretty much, ubiquitous in all these states, or most of these states, that these votes are basically winner take all. But it sort of starts with this populist movement of Andrew Jackson, the candidate of the people. He felt if the people voted and their votes were counted, he would get elected. And that's what happened both in 1828 and 1832. As I mentioned, the enmity between Jackson and Henry Clay never ceased after that 1824 election. And later on, Clay would run one more time for president. He ran again in 1832 against Jackson. He was soundly trounced in an 1832 election, but he ran again in 1844 against James Polk. By this time, Clay was the head of his own party, the Whig Party, and James Polk was the Democratic candidate. In this case, the Electoral College served James Polk pretty well, and he won a good majority of the electoral votes. But in terms of the popular vote, it was very razor-thin close. Polk won 49.5% of the vote in 1844, 1,339,000 votes. Henry Clay, the Whig candidate, got 48.1% of the vote, 1,300,000 votes. 49.5% versus 48.1%. Very, very close. In New York State, the vote between Polk was even more razor thin, 237,588 for Polk. For Henry Clay, 232,482, a plurality of just 5,106 votes. If 5,106 votes had gone the way of Henry Clay in New York State, in that election, New York State would have gone in the Electoral College for Henry Clay, and he would have become president instead of Polk. That is how crucial the relationship with the popular vote and the Electoral College is. It can be as breathtakingly close as that. In that case, New York was a swing state. And in that year, there was a third party, an abolitionist party called the Liberty Party, and their candidate was James Birney. James Birney got 15,000 votes from New York in that election. If he had not been on the slate, Henry Clay might have become president. It was as close as that. And as the kicker, Andrew Jackson was still alive when that election took place. And he was very, very ill, very sick. He was in his late 70s. But he said after that election, I'm so glad I lived this long in order that I could see Henry Clay defeated one more time for president. So the Electoral College, it truly did prove to be Andrew Jackson's downfall in 1824, but proved to be his friend along with the popular vote in 1828 and 1832. And again, Henry Clay found it to be his nemesis in 1844. So the Electoral College, it can make a great winner. It can also, prove to be a great equalizer and, great, graveyard for presidential candidates. Another very closely fought controversial election was the election that gave us Abraham Lincoln in 1860. But by golly, that was no slam dunk for Honest Abe. And we'll hear all about it next week. So I hope we see you all again, and we'll talk about the Electoral College and the popular vote, and we'll talk about this great contest of 1860 with you all. And until then, the polls are closed. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good week.